I see our participant list growing, which is great. So I think we're going to get started. So official welcomes everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on this important webinar this afternoon. My name is Margaret Chapman. I'm COO and partner at Narrative Research, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. I also volunteer with the Chamber of Commerce in Halifax and just came off my year as chair, so I'm officially a has-been past year now, which is great. I'm happy to welcome you all to one of the Chamber's wonderful Navigating COVID-19 webinars. This is a special one for me because I'm actually involved in the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So some of the presenters that you're going to hear from today and myself are part of the Atlantic Corporate Volunteer Council. So really looking forward to this discussion. Now more than ever, the private sector needs to use volunteerism to drive goals forward and to create a sustainable workforce during this challenging time. And we're going to be talking about the benefits and opportunities of building a meaningful employee volunteer program. It's not a simple task, but it is possible through the guidance, insights, and expertise of our presenters. This is your opportunity today to ask questions about the future of volunteerism and Impact 2030 project. If you've never heard about that, you'll hear some more details today. And if you do have a question during the presentation, you can type that into the chat box. We're currently in a presentation mode, so if you hit the chat button at the bottom of your screen, it might come up in the middle of the screen, but I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom by now, but if you're not, you do have the ability to move those windows around to accommodate what you want to see on your screen. So you can customize your view and play around with the buttons to make sure you're comfortable and can see everything you want to. When you are commenting in the chat box, everybody will be able to see all the questions unless you tailor that to be to a specific person. So just to bear that in mind. All right, so I'm going to introduce two of our four presenters today. So I'm going to start off with Chris Jarvis. Chris is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Realized Worth, and also the executive director of RW Institute. Hi, Chris. I'll turn over to you for a minute.
Hello, everybody. Just checking to see. Okay, good. I'm not on mute. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm going to jump back in here as soon as we meet Kurt, kind of my co-presenter, my aide-de-camp. So thank you, Margaret. Good to be with you, everybody.
Super. And next, their second presenter is Kurt Benson, who is founder and CEO of Tidal League. Welcome, Kurt, and I'll turn over to you guys now.
Thank you, Margaret. appreciate the introduction, and very excited to talk to everyone today about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, workplace volunteering, and how we're doing and activating locally here in this region. So giving you guys all a broad overview of what we'll be doing over the coming months and how we look to collaborate with the public and private sectors. So I'll hand it over to Chris there, and we'll get started.
Perfect. Thank you for being here, everybody. I'm so glad that you took time out of your day, or at least put us on the screen in the background while you're doing some email, because we all know how it works with webinars. I'm thrilled to be here. You're going to, with a great group of people from the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council. This is something we've been working on since 2013. We're getting some traction. We've got this great project that I want to tell you about right in this call, this webinar, that I think will leave you with some, especially if you're interested, hopefully you joined if you're interested in employee volunteering. So if you're interested in employee volunteering, you're interested in the region, more volunteering in the region, more the private sector, connecting with the public sector and working together for collective action, this is the call for you. But we're going to spend a couple of minutes as well thinking specifically about e-volunteering, digital volunteering, online volunteering, virtual volunteering, whatever you want to call it. There's an opportunity right now to do more of that kind of online volunteering because there's no other way to do it, right? Like the entire planet came to a standstill and had to transition to a Zoom reality. And now we're trying to think, well, can I help online? What does that look like? So we're going to talk about a project that we're doing across Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, to really increase the capacity of the region to support employees who want to volunteer with the backing of their employer. And we're going to take a couple of minutes and specifically look at what that looks like in terms of online volunteering, because that's the current reality. So we'll meet the rest of the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council here on the call in a second, but first let me tell you a little bit more about Impact 2030 and myself. I am from Halifax. I'm calling in from Baltimore. That's where I live, but I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, up in Fairview. Have enjoyed all of the provinces except for Newfoundland. I was talking to some of our council members who are going to be joining from Memorial University. Still need to make it over there, but my heart is in the Maritimes, so this is a very important project for me. Beyond what it can produce for the region, just personally connected to it. And I know the folks who are on the call with me today who represent the council are as well. So a couple things as we go through. I have, I need to confess some things. This may be oversharing. I know, in the Maritimes, we're very, polite, accepting, welcoming, but let's not go too far too fast because that's just weird. I think it's weird everywhere. But anyways, let me tell you, after calls like this, I tend to evaluate my own personal self-worth and place in the universe based on how many people talk in the chat box and how many videos they're on. So I know this is a problem. I'm really working on it. But if you can help me while I'm dealing with that by just be courageous like Barb Preston, who turned on her video and she's with us and we can see her. Hey, Barb, that is a great blue top. Love it. Okay. Barb, where are you calling in from? Can you come off mute and just say where you're calling in from?
I'm calling in from Moncton, New Brunswick.
Moncton, that's where my mom's folks are from. I spent a lot of time on McLaughlin Drive.
I live a quarter of a mile from McLaughlin Drive.
Oh, really?
There you go.
See, now this is how the world gets smaller, just like this. So Barb,
Yep.
What organization are you with?
Well, I'm with Simplicity Designs in Halifax, and basically was a retired HR person who got on board to help for a few months, and 3 or 4 years I'm still here.
All right.
So it's, yep.
That is awesome. So Barb, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on this call. I hope we give you what you need or what you might find useful, okay? So we're gonna connect with each other on this call. So use the chat box, ask questions. If something comes up and you think, hey, I don't know what that means, ask the question. If something comes up and you think, hey, I know more about that, or you should know about this initiative, put that URL in or write that in. Like, let's get smarter together here. And for the other gentleman who just came on video too, thank you. My self-esteem, my little meter is going up. Yep, thank you very much, brother. Can you share your name and where you're calling in from?
I'm Skylar, and I'm calling from Halifax, and I work with Nathan and Nada, who I also see on the call with the Halifax Partnership. I'm trying to keep my dog from climbing all over me, which is why my video was not on at first.
Skylar, your parents named you Skylar Sky.
No, Sky is my nickname, so I go by, my last name is Smith.
Okay, Smith. Okay, that actually. So Sky. Okay, very cool. And then Lacey Morton? How do you say your name, Lacey? Sorry.
It's Elsie. Like the letter L and the letter C, Elsie.
Okay, Elsie. Where are you calling in from, Elsie?
I'm calling in from the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia right now, and I'm with a registered Canadian charity. It's an anti-bullying society.
Perfect. So glad you're on the call. Thanks for bringing that perspective into this conversation. Anybody else who's courageous enough to come off video and use the chat box, the Chamber is going to give away a free iPad at the end of this call for the most participative person online. So make sure you, oh, Tina, I promised I wouldn't do this. So Tina is one of the chairs of the, I'm sorry, I forgot. But yeah, the Chamber will do that. I'm lying. But let's pretend like that's going to happen. They'll make it a lot more fun. Okay, you ready? Let's dive in. We got 50 minutes. We're going to go through a lot of stuff. We want to make sure to give you something valuable that you can think through. Hey, if I was going to do volunteering online, what would that look like? What would I need to consider? We'll get to that. But what is this big Atlantic capacity mapping project? What does employee volunteering look like in Atlantic Canada? I'm glad you asked. Let's take a view, okay? First of all, Impact 2030. This is an organization that my partner and I had the privilege of launching back in 2011. It became official in 2015 with an announcement at the United Nations. And this effort is very simply a focus on mobilizing the global workforce. So not a small target, but the global workforce to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So as everybody knows, the Millennial Development Goals were developed by 7 white guys in the basement of the UN, and they faxed them around the world in 2010. They only applied to developing nations. It was kind of like, poor people, here's how we can help you. Developed people will do that. So half the world was doing, the other half was helping. It was an us and them. It wasn't terrible. It just wasn't, this version's a lot better. So in 2015, back in 2012, I think Columbia said, hey, what's going to replace the Millennial Development Goals when they're out? And they started the process. In 2015, these goals were announced. In 2016, they launched. So they go to 2030. So 15 years to address 17 goals. All 17 goals have indicators underneath them, targets underneath them. And there are 169 targets that connect to those 17 goals. And they pretty much cover all of human experience, except for, and I apologize to Sky for this, dogs and cats. Like, I know most of us, when we volunteer with dogs and cats. You're going to be hard pressed to find loving little animals or pets in the development goals. It's not that they're not there, it's just that they're not explicitly there. But pretty much everything else is. So there's 17 goals, 169 targets, and then each of these targets have multiple indicators, hundreds and hundreds of indicators. The Government of Canada has aligned in their wellness programs to the goals, and Atlantic Canada, in one way or another, is looking at it. If you go to your local United Way, great organizations across the Atlantic provinces really have been there for a long time, supporting the voices who may not be heard and the issues that may be overlooked. And they have aligned some of their poverty efforts to the goals as well. So these sort of provide a universal framework to understand how are we making our communities better. And the focal point of Impact 2030 is how are we making our communities better through employee volunteering. So that means that Impact 2030 has to do 3 things. 1, activate. We have to create awareness of what's going on with the goals, and we have to create awareness of the idea of employee volunteering. It's not very well known in Atlantic Canada. McCain's doing something with it. Irving launched a program a few years ago. Emira, we worked with Emira back in the early 2000s. They were doing some work. So there are a number of organizations doing work, but in terms of coordinated and broad awareness, that hasn't happened yet, and that's part of what this initiative is trying to create. Number 2, collaborate. How do companies, all mobilizing millions of people around the world, do it in a way that benefits their communities in the most efficient and effective way? How do we partner with nonprofits in the best way so we don't overwhelm them? That's one of the things that Impact 2030 is looking to do as well. And then finally, measure. How do we know what we did? After it's all said and done in 2030, what was the quantifiable contribution of employee volunteering to achieving the goals, the 169 targets underneath the 17 goals? What's the connection? And we're trying to figure that out. And I have to tell you, it's really hard to do. But a step in the right direction is to understand what's the resource first. And that's what the capacity mapping project is. What do we have to work with? And did that resource, did that value contribution increase? And what was the value of that contribution over time? So we're going to get to that in just a second. But first, let me introduce our new CEO. She started in January of this year, Dr. Ala Murabit, and I'm very proud to say she is a Canadian. She was living in Boston for a little while, a few months, decided that was a mistake in a COVID world, moved back to Vancouver, where she's at, with her brilliant heart surgeon husband. Like the two of them, they're too smart. Like, I don't know. They're intimidating. But anyways, she is phenomenal. She's also, as you can tell, is Muslim. She is from, has her nationality. She's a dual nationality with Liberia. And she is a high-level commissioner on health, employment, and economic growth with the Sustainable Development Goals. That means she helped write them. And that means she personally knows the Secretary General. And that means that around the UN and all of that kind of thing, she's a bit of a superstar. In fact, she was on the dais to do a presentation before they allowed heads of state up, like Donald Trump in the last September sessions. So you can learn more about her. We're very pleased to have her, very proud to have her as the leader of Impact 2030. And we're very pleased to have a number of companies also participating. As you can see, these are larger brands, larger companies. These are our founding partners. We have about 50 collaborating partners as well, some of whom, some of the brands you would obviously know as well. And TD Bank, you can see TD Group Bank's logo there. TD is the first founding partner in Canada. So they're the first founding partner, Canadian founding partner, and we're very glad to have them represented on the council in Tina, embodied in Tina Murphy, who's with us here today. Every 2 years, we go to the UN. We report on what we have achieved and how we have achieved it. It's a very close-knit group. It's only a couple hundred people from around the world looking to achieve these goals through employee volunteering. So if you know some of the faces on this, you might notice, well, my face is on there, but Andrea Hewitt, she's with McKinnis Cooper, downtown Halifax. She really helped set this group up. And then Stephanie Roberts, who is with LGB Canada, has been a part of it from the beginning and actually helped frame out some of the questions in the capacity mapping report that we'll talk about in a second. These, we form councils, impact councils all around the world. Here's a screenshot of the Impact 2030 Council in Australia. We have them in New Zealand, UAE, Turkey, Portugal, Baltimore, so on and so forth. We'll have hundreds around the world. Close-knit groups that can actually make things happen on the ground through conversations and connections like this. So getting to know people like Barb, who lives just a little ways away from where I grew up as a kid. I love this. She's like thumbs up on that one. That was great. So how does it work? Real quick here. First, we want to get clarity on who's doing what with whom. Secondly, I'm going to share with you a quick case study. We produced the first ever report like this in UAE last year. What's the value? Why should I care about this? I joined a chamber conversation. I gave you an hour of my time. Now I need to take something away from this investment. So we're going to get there too. And what are the key steps? We're going to do that. First of all, the whole point of mapping the Atlantic provinces is to understand what is going on with employee volunteering. One, it's never been tried before. Two, it does provide some insight as to what companies are currently doing, why they're doing it, and how they're measuring it. But maybe most importantly, it provides us sort of an inventory, a resource inventory that then we can talk to premiers and mayors with. And Kurt has been doing a great job connecting us with so far the Nova Scotia Premier and the Mayor Savage of Halifax. We want to align this incredible resource with regional priorities. We map it all to the Sustainable Development Goals, but that is not the point. The point is not to just achieve the goals. The point is to move the needle on things that matter to communities at a hyper-regional level, and that's what this is about. And then finally, we want to understand what are the barriers? Like what things could we do to remove some of these barriers so that companies could invest more of this human capital through their employees in the region. If you want to check out a version of what this report looks like, this is the first one, Investing for the Future, the practice and potential of employee volunteering in the United Arab Emirates. We did that last year. That was produced last year, all with volunteers. Companies volunteered the time. Grant Thornton printed 250 copies, which cost about $25 each of this printed version. They did that for us. And then KPMG has decided to take the project on for the next 3 years, collect the data and write the data. We are thrilled, absolutely head over heels, that Narrative Research has agreed to be our region's, what would I call it? Research experts, partners, analysts, all those really cool words where they sound great, but I don't have a clue how to do them myself. So Margaret and Nick, I don't know, Nick Thompson's on the call as well. Absolutely thrilled to be partnering with them. Their incredible generosity and the celebrity status of Narrative Research in the region in terms of a preeminent organization, just glad to have them on board. So this report won't be terrible when it comes out. If you don't have your video on, Margaret's laughing. I don't know if she's laughing uncomfortably or laughing like, no, that was funny, but still, I'm a bit uncomfortable. It's a bit of both. Okay. What we're able to do with these reports, we're doing them in Baltimore, Turkey, and a number of other places in the world, is really get the voices and the perspective of regional leaders like the mayors and the premiers, even the lieutenant governors. In the UAE, we had members of the royal family and leaders in the community, as well as ambassadors from other countries, do call outs and talk about the importance of this for the UAE region. And in the end, we brought everybody together. Hilton, one of the partners of Impact 2030, hosted us at their incredible property in downtown Dubai. And we brought 100 people together, and we talked about how employee volunteering is an untapped resource to really move the needle on addressing environmental and social issues across the United Arab Emirates. The government of the UAE was thrilled. They had never actually considered this before, but by laying this data out, here's what we're doing, here's who we're working with, and these key finding highlights, it's about a 60-page report. I think it really clarified the role that this work could play in a region in moving the region forward. So fundamentally, here's the value of why we're doing this report. We're going to get to e-volunteering in a second here because they are connected. Number one, we're going to gain some clarity on the private sector's investment in community through employee volunteering. Who's doing what, where, with whom. We're going to have a better understanding of regional priorities and opportunities for collaboration. And that's because we're going to work really closely with our stakeholders, like the United Way and other organizations that are on the ground saying, okay, in rural Nova Scotia, up near Pictou, here's what we need. So instead of telling people what we need, we're going to collaboratively understand these things together. Number three, an elevated discourse on the value of employee volunteering. We're going to take this report and present it on the floor of the United Nations. We are changing the math behind what is employee volunteering and what purpose does it serve by putting it up on the stage of what the biggest global stage that we have as a species at this point. Number four, stronger connection in the region between CSR managers and NGOs and government. We're going to make it the distance between what Irving is doing and what TD is doing and what the premiers in different provinces are doing and what the United Way is doing and who they're representing. We want to shorten the line between all of these key stakeholders in this process. And finally, a coalition of stakeholders interested in collective action impact. We're really going to introduce some new practices that could shift the equation as to what this is and how it works. And that's what this report does. So at the end, we'll talk about some action points, but basically we're going to try and get the word out to as many organizations as we can, small to medium-sized enterprises and companies, about the importance of the survey and the report that the survey is going to produce and how we're going to use it and the value of it. And that's coming up. So Kurt, this is where you and I can maybe answer some questions. Are there any questions as we go through these three final points here, these slides? Any questions in the chat box about anything that we've been talking about so far? Or maybe, is the chat box coming up on your screen? Maybe that's not happening either.
I've got the chat box up here.
Okay.
Got a few people starting to get in it and talk about where they're from, but we'll get some more dialogue, I hope.
Kurt, you've been involved. Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, I
just wanted to thank Dana for posting the reports as well, because that's great reading for everyone to see a little bit more detail about what you guys have been up to.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you, Margaret. And there was another voice. Who did?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chris, I mean, we'll build on some of the questions as they come through. I've just to tell everybody how I got involved. It's probably been just over a month now, but when you look at what Impact 2030 is and these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we've got 193 countries in the world, but every single local region can start to push the needle forward. And what we're doing here in Atlantic Canada amongst the Atlantic provinces is really starting to grow the awareness. So for everybody on this call, it's when you look at the goals ranging from no poverty to good health and well-being, education, what we need to do is as an Atlantic team is to start to spread the awareness and get everybody to start collaborating. So whether you're a small nonprofit, whether you're a small independent company, whether you're working for a big organization like Tina is with TD, we need to start to spread the word, gather data, so that we can put this report forward, and then that way we have a clear idea of how to achieve these goals. So, you know, feel free to ask questions, because it's going to take all of us in order to really push forward on this massive global initiative. And I'm very excited to say that here in Atlantic Canada, we're leading the way with this initiative, I think, in Canada, and we can really make a lot of noise together. So that's just some input from me, Chris, and hopefully we can get the conversation started.
Yeah, Kurt, I think that's a really good point, because this will be the first capacity mapping report in Canada. There is a Toronto Impact Council, but they've not done a report yet. So we get to be, you know, the first, which is good for us. Come on, guys. I mean, right? Like,
I think it's massive. I mean, you know, a lot of times we're forgotten, but the East Coast is growing, and we've got some fantastic people out here, fantastic organizations, and we can't all be doing separate things. We need to collaborate. So both public and private, this is now the time to start to spread awareness, find out what different organizations are doing, so we can collaborate together and move forward. So as we as we move forward and as people become more familiar with the initiative, I think we're going to have some solid traction, and we're going to be able to expedite the process of getting this done.
Perfect. Margaret, would you mind speaking to why this was interesting to narrative research and the work that you're doing there?
Well, I think to start, one of the things Kurt just mentioned and you were talking about is being first in Canada is really it's really attractive. It's great that it's happening here first. So often Atlantic Canada follows Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, and so it's really great to be kind of right at the front on such an important initiative. I think secondly, the organization that I work for, and my whole life, I've really valued volunteering, and it's something that I've spent a lot of time doing. I think in Atlantic Canada, because we don't have as long of a commute as in other big cities, we have more time to volunteer. So I always think of that when I moved to Halifax. I thought, okay, well, now I'm not spending 2 hours every single day in my car or on the train. So I have that extra time that I can devote to something else. And I've volunteered for a huge number of organizations, and that's kind of where my mindset is with Atlantic Canada. I think we should kind of punch above our weight here, because I think we've got the culture of volunteerism and helping communities, but we also should, in many cases, have more of a mindset and a time to spend on it. And you know, whenever we can donate our expertise, it's something that we're really happy to do. And my colleague Nick is on the call here as well, and has been working with the team already and really enjoying the initiative so far. And we're just getting started. So
perfect. That's great. Barb asked a question. Kurt, I'm going to come back to you in a second. I just noticed it come up in case there's more chats. But first, Tina, we're going to introduce you officially in a few minutes here, but could you talk about why TD is interested as an organization in this concept of employee volunteering, and maybe if you can make the connection specifically to Atlantic Canada?
Absolutely. TD revamped our giving strategy probably about 2 to 3 years ago and launched the TD Ready commitment, where we're looking to make sustainable differences in the community, and it aligns completely with what Impact 2030 is looking to do. So it allows us to not only support an initiative, but also to have our people get involved and work towards common goals, and we're thrilled.
Awesome. Great. Kurt, any questions in chat for us?
So Barb had asked, are we also tapping into associations? He believes that the seniors group is one with vast expertise that would be comprised of excellent volunteers.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the interesting things around employee volunteering is for companies to think through, how do we engage our customers or our clients or other groups like the Lions Club or the Odd Fellows and that kind of thing, where you do have a strong emphasis on community investment and community action. And that is definitely, I think, something that we can look at and think through. What would that look like organically in the Maritimes? Because it could be different for us than it, say, is on the West Coast. I think that's a great question, point to bring up, Barb. Thank you for doing that. Okay, let's take just quickly a few minutes here. We're going to talk about virtual volunteering, and then we're going to come back to the report. And maybe for any of us who are on the call who are thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting, I would like to participate in supporting the mapping process, or I know a company or somebody at a company who is into employee volunteering, and I'd like to make that connection between this project and that. So, but first, virtual volunteering. Now, virtual volunteering is an expression of volunteering, employee volunteering, that's been around for quite some time, but it's always been seen as optional. Now, my company, Realize Worth, we did some work with Deloitte Australia in 2012 to 2014 on micro-volunteering. That's a type of virtual volunteering. It's small chunks of time, 5 or 10 minutes, but I do it as a group, and we kind of get a bigger project done by chunking it up into small bite-sized pieces for everybody. They won some awards for that. In fact, their work in the country of Australia, and there are a lot of people who live in Australia, created such an awareness of online volunteering that when they did a survey in 2015 of one of the most interesting areas of employee or volunteering or corporate citizenship, e-volunteering was like at a 70% number. Now, before Deloitte had done it, there was some awareness, but it wasn't that interesting. But because they were doing it, because they were creating awareness, because they were winning awards, it pushed it to the front of mind for people who had any sense of what was going on in the space. So e-volunteering right now, obviously, the great leveler of societies is not the nemesis in Marvel Comics. What was his name again? Kurt, what was the bad guy's name in the last Marvel comic? Thanos, right? Is that it?
Yes, that's
yeah, okay.
Thanos, yes.
Thanos. Little known fact from South Africa, Thanos. No, I'm kidding. He's not. But Kurt is from that area, so I reference it. Or sub-Saharan Africa. Anyways, Kurt, where are you from originally again?
I am from Zimbabwe.
So not South Africa. Okay, so chalk that up to oops for me. But Thanos, so we're not even talking about that. COVID has just made it like Zoom normal, WebEx normal. It's just, I'm watching Colbert at night, just in his, I don't know where he is in his study, Stephen Colbert doing the Late Show. It's just like, everybody feels way more normal and accessible. Even celebrities are, look, right? Ala was talking, CEO, Dr. Ala Murabit was talking about being on conference calls with heads of state and having, like Prime Minister Trudeau saying, excuse me, and he just has to get up and deal with something in the House and then come back to the call. Just weird realities now that everybody has to deal with, let alone not having pants on for phone calls. Typically that doesn't happen in real world meetings. But virtual volunteering now is front and center in terms of how do we do volunteering, because we can't go in person. So real quickly, for those on the call who may find this interesting, and what we want to do with the ACVC, the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council, and the Impact 2030 initiative in the region is bring insights to this kind of thing to the conversation. And the Chamber is an excellent partner to do this, because since the founding of Halifax, 1750, Kayla, was that when the Chamber of Halifax started in 17? They hopped off the boat. One of the first things they did in the first few weeks was, let's start the Chamber of Commerce for Halifax in the middle of the woods. Is that what happened?
Pretty much.
Okay, good to know. Like, they all sat around on wood stumps and had their first meeting. But that I couldn't even imagine that has been true. But that's phenomenal. So what we want to bring through networks like that and through projects like this is informative and insightful practices around how to make more contribution to community supported by the private sector in a way that aligns with regional priorities and what matters to us in the region. And virtual volunteering is one of the ways to do that. So we thought we would take just a couple minutes and just highlight this idea of virtual volunteering. It's sort of an amuse-bouche in our meal today. It's sort of a funny thing for your mouth, a bit of an appetizer. I think that's probably the way to go here, is call it an appetizer. So the first thing you have to think about, first question is, where do I find remote volunteering opportunities? So anybody on the call, this is for everybody, including Kayla, who's kind of with the chamber and running it. Write your name in the chat box and tell us where the last best place was that you did online volunteering. And the answer can be nowhere, because it's a new idea. So that is a totally legitimate category. But if you've got a nonprofit that you think is the bee's knees for online volunteering, please put that in the chat box. We're going to capture that later and share it around in the follow-up. But there are three things that you typically have to think through. One is organizations that support remote volunteering, new initiatives that arise out of a current situation like COVID response, and in the United States, as well as other parts of the world now, Black Lives Matter or equity, racial issues. And then finally, matching platforms that I can go to find an opportunity, sort of like a marketplace of opportunities. The first category, organizations that support volunteering, we've got some good history of organizations like this in Canada. CUSO, for example. They've been doing international development for decades, and they've been able to incorporate e-volunteering into this process. So you'll want to check out CUSO. Again, we're going to share this around with everybody afterwards so you can check it out. Amnesty International. This Amnesty Decoders, this project was built with the intent of using support with employees on or volunteers online. The same with this one with Micro Mentor. This one is kind of an overlap with the COVID issue, but they're implementing a mentoring process and system that they've been using online for years. So they're very good at it. Another one that we've done this project with Apple in Cupertino with their team, Missing Maps. Really a fascinating idea that we didn't know anything about until we went looking, but there are entire groups of people who are not included in the history of humanity in terms of the main chapters. They're there, they matter, but we just are not, in terms of the dominant groups on the planet, we're not seeing them. Missing Maps looks to elevate their identity and talk about what we can do to bring their groups and their issues to the forefront. Then we've got new initiatives, and as I mentioned, these may come out of COVID or the Black Lives Matter initiative. This one here, Collective Crisis Intelligence, I put this in here because it's a great website to just go learn more about what it means to support or respond to things like COVID. So it's a broad range of insights that people can use to learn. If you're managing one of these programs, like Tina is involved in, she could use this as a reference point for her employees who are looking to get more involved. There have been a lot of great examples from around the world. This one's from Lithuania. They got the idea from Estonia, their neighbor. They're up near Russia, and it's called Hack the Crisis. And they've brought people together, and they've picked some lanes of topics, put people to work on Slack. They came up with some really cool ideas. One was doctors, this was back in March, doctors are spending all of their time in the hospital, sleeping in the hospital, and they're not getting home to their apartments, and they have animals. So who's letting their animals out? Who's looking after their animals? The kind of anxiety they have on the floor, serving people with this in the back of their mind. So they organize, these people all self-organize to go get the keys, take their dogs for a walk, put them back, make sure they were looked after, so the frontline responders could focus on the people, the patients in the hospitals. Great example. In Nova Scotia, the United Way has been teaming up with other organizations, and they've come up with a number of projects. I'm just going to highlight a couple here. One is face covering masks in support of Atlantic Compassion Fund. You can read more about that. We'll send this out afterwards. This has happened in various forms around the world. Just remote volunteering means that I'm not doing it online. I'm actually putting together masks, but we're getting them to people who need them, and I'm doing it from home. I'm not going to like a community center to do it. And then volunteerism for employees. This one here, you can see there's a number of activities that you can do, and you can learn more about that by connecting into the United Way. So really, we want the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council and this initiative to bring us together to act as a bit of a hub. So when you're thinking, I've got tens of thousands or hundreds or dozens of employees, and I would like to do something. As an employer, I would like to get some direction to say, let's make a contribution and sort of respond to the issues that we're facing. The ACVC, what we want to do is act as a hub, so you know who to go to get this kind of cool information. We're connected into the chamber, we're connected into United Way, we're connected into other great companies that are doing things and showing leadership in the region, and that's what this is all about. And then finally, matching platforms. Okay, this is all great, but where do I go to find a bunch of opportunities? Okay, so there's a number of different things that you can do here. Volunteer Canada has a list of opportunities, but they're not necessarily a matching platform. Volunteer Match in California, San Francisco, California, they do matching, but it's a good example because it's not really a Canadian example, and you're probably not going to find anything from Atlantic Canada there. Taproot, another US example. This one, they provide fully vetted opportunities, but you can check them out as well, because even though you might not find an organization in Atlantic Canada, you may be able to find topics or issues that matter to you, and they're just globally related. Some cities, like Los Angeles, have built out a platform that is hyper-local and local issues in coordination with the mayor's office to get their citizens involved in things like homelessness. They have 54,000 men and women who sleep outside under the highways across Los Angeles. And this is one of their efforts to try and mobilize the community to address the myriad of concerns around that, rather than just making it a police issue to pick people up and throw them in jail. And then, of course, the most global version of this would be the United Nations Volunteers. You can go in there, and they have a whole bunch of different categories that you can click through to find the opportunities that you like. So that's a little bit about employee volunteering online. We will share with you an example, like a link to a longer version where we talk about what companies should think through when they support employees online. We're not going to do that today on this call. We're going to go back and talk a little bit more about this project that we're trying to do, and why and how maybe the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council wants to bring a tremendous amount of value in terms of this human capital and community investment and the private sector supported coordination with local communities to deal with environmental and social issues. So we're going to do that a little bit now. And in order to do that, we're going to take some time and just introduce the rest of the council. I'm going to kick it over to Kurt to introduce Tina and Nathan so I can get a drink of water, because I've wanted to cough for the last 5 minutes and I've been holding it down, and I think I'm going to lose my mind. Have you ever done that? You just like push it down, don't think about it, don't think about it, don't cough, don't cough, don't cough. Now I'm going to go on mute. Over to you, Kurt.
Thanks, Chris. Go cough. It's my pleasure to introduce two of colleagues that I'm working with on this initiative. Nathan Laird, who is the part of the steering committee and co-chair. We work closely where I volunteer at the Halifax partnership with the Connector program, and that is Nathan's expertise, where he is the program manager there. And Tina Murphy, who is also the part of the steering committee and co-chair, and she is the manager of community banking and external events for TD Bank. So welcome, Nathan and Tina.
Thanks so much, Kurt.
Kurt.
Oh, go ahead, Tina.
Not at all. This is the challenge, isn't it, with technology? Nathan, you take it.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for joining the call. As Kurt mentioned, I manage the Connector program with the Halifax partnership, which has really built, a very successful model completely around corporate volunteering and people giving of their time. And it's been a really great Halifax success story that's now been, expanded to 36 cities in Canada, into the United States and Europe as well. So I really look forward to being involved in this project to bring light, on a global stage to the work that we're doing here in Atlantic Canada, because we are doing, some incredible work, and it really does deserve to be recognized. So I really look forward to, participating with people on this call as we, build this and take this initiative further. Over to you now, Tina.
And I think to build it further, what we're looking to do is to connect with like-minded individuals and organizations here in Atlantic Canada. If you're aware of a corporation that has a volunteer manager or a coordinator that puts together volunteer programs for the staff, please let us know. And if the entire subject really interests you and you want to give back and join narrative research, as well as the rest of the ACVC Council, send us a quick email and we'll have you work with us directly. The most exciting thing is, as Margaret has said, it's not often that Atlantic Canada gets to lead the rest of the country. And that's what we're excited about, because nowhere in Canada are the people more generous in spirit, in time, and financial resources than here on the East Coast. And I can't wait to show the world that.
Thank you. Chris, final comments.
Yes, let's, as we do that, let's go back to the chat box. I'll give you a second to skim through that, Kurt. And while you're doing that, I just want to mention Amanda Richards is on the call with us as well. Sorry, Amanda Richards. I put two words together. Jennifer Richards, she's a person in her own right. She's on the call as well. Thanks for having us. You can see more information about Jennifer on the website. We'll send a link to that as well. Amanda Bent, who's in New Brunswick. She's with the University in New Brunswick, and she is bringing together a number of connections that she has through her work there. We also have Nada, who works alongside of Nathan with Halifax Connectors. Phenomenal insights and just absolute joy to have on the council. Margaret Chapman, who you met. I call her Champion, but she's Chapman. I'm going to change it to Champion. Nada, thanks for coming on video. Spectacular hair. Okay, Dana Jenkins, who I work with at Realize Worth, and she's in Toronto. Oh, we won't hold that against her. And then Nick, who's been mentioned already, and is Margaret's compatriot. So thrilled to have everybody on the call with us who's helping lead this initiative. So as I put up the action steps, Kurt, any questions or comments, either in the chat box or if people want to come off mute, anybody from the council wants to come off mute, add anything. We've got 13 minutes left here. Nathan, you're almost there.
I will just add in, if anyone on the call would like to get a copy of the survey for their organization when we send it out, please enter your information in the chat box. We're going to compile all that, and we'll make sure that the survey gets sent directly to you as soon as we launch it.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Who else? Somebody else?
So I wonder, guys, if I could ask a couple questions just about volunteering in this time. And, you know, I think, Chris, you called it the great leveler when COVID hit and everybody's working remotely, or lots of people are working remotely. And I'm just wondering how the pandemic has impacted workplace volunteering. Do you think it's lessened it? Has it increased it? Is there room for more?
Let me answer first, and then I'm curious to see how that may be true in different places. Nathan, in working with employee volunteers, Tina, in mobilizing, and anybody else in the call, like even folks we haven't heard from. So what we found is people got bored of Netflix pretty quickly. Great pastime, but I mean, you can't do it 24 hours a day, right? So I can't go out, I can't do anything, or I shouldn't. But I want to feel productive. So Adobe, for example, sent out just a simple list. It's a very basic approach of everywhere their employees could get involved, and they just begged them, if you do something, count your hours. And they counted 8,000 hours in March. Now, 8,000 hours for a company the size of Adobe, based in San Francisco, Acrobat, you know those guys, isn't huge, but they've never had that many people do online volunteering ever, like in a year. Like they did in 4 weeks before what was not even happening over the course of 12 months. So it's really created some awareness around it. Nonprofits are scrambling to think about how to take advantage of it. Habitat for Humanity talked to their head office in the United States in Atlanta, and they said, well, we can't build houses, and we only raise money when we build houses. So what? Like they were just stuck with a reality they had never even imagined possible. And they're scrambling to think through, how do we keep people involved? Because housing as an issue doesn't go away just because we can't get out and pound wood together, right? It's still an issue for the people. It's an issue. What could we be doing while we can't build houses? So there's a lot of interesting conversations happening out there. Nathan, have you seen any, before we open up more broadly, but Have you seen a change or switch, or what's your reality with Halifax Connectors?
We've actually found our connectors in the program very engaged to meet online. So initially, when we transitioned the program from an in-person to a virtual model, we reached out to our connector database to see who would be interested. And we were at 99%, probably above 99% that said they wanted to do it.
Really?
And we've been having more people proactively reach out saying exactly what you're saying, Chris, that, you know, I'm at home, I want to do something to give back,
Yeah.
what can I do? So we're seeing a great pickup.
That's great. That's great.
I'm wondering where people can get started. So if there's anyone on the call who may not have a formalized volunteering program in their workplace, what's the first step?
I'm going to be quiet for a change and let anybody else answer that. Anybody got something that's worked for you for a first step for getting involved? That's a good question, Margaret.
Yeah, it's Tina. It's a great question. I would actually reach out to the counterparts even on this call, and I can certainly share from a TD Bank Group's perspective on how we set it up. We have an entire team that worked with Realized Worth to set things up. There's also an organization here in Atlantic Canada that is volunteer managements or volunteer managers that meets, I believe they meet every other month. And that's another great resource to have a conversation with those people because they have real life experiences. And there's tons of articles and guidelines. Just a quick Google search, Margaret, would lead anyone to some really strong papers that have been written and some checklists so that you know where you should be going and what you can be starting with. And you won't be doing it alone. There's too many of us working in this type of field that we can absolutely lend support. Great question.
I have another one. We may be preaching to the choir here on this call, but I'm wondering if we all want to be advocates for volunteering and workplace volunteer programs, what would you guys say is the number one reason, if you have a skeptic in your organization, what's the number one reason to volunteer and to set up a workplace volunteering program?
That's a great question. I obviously have some thoughts on it, but again, I've been doing most of the talking, so I'm going to be quiet and just open up to anybody else.
Well, Margaret, the biggest thing is aligning people's interests with volunteering opportunities. So, you know, if you have an organization, let's just say there's 10, you have 10 people part of the organization, and you bring this to the table and people are not too excited about it, it's really, from a leadership standpoint, the leadership in that organization need to understand who their people are, align opportunities that align with their people's interests, and then bring that to the table. If you find volunteering opportunities that are in your wheelhouse, you'll be a lot more inclined to getting involved. So that is the biggest point. And a lot of people just aren't aware that there are tons of volunteering opportunities in a field that they are interested in. It just needs to be presented to them, and that's why we can all help, you know, put in some groundwork and provide some valuable resources.
Kurt, and you use volunteers, right, in your work with Tidal?
Yeah, we actually have a couple different partnerships with the University of New Brunswick, the University of Toronto, where we are able to complement you know, those universities through different volunteering programs, as well as internships. And then we also have a volunteering leg where we're doing a couple, or working on some initiatives, both locally and globally.
And what about someone who's skeptical about online volunteering? Like they say, you know, I'm happy to go and build that house for Habitat for Humanity, or cook that meal at a shelter, or march in the Pride Parade, but you know, I don't want to sit in front of my computer. It won't have any impact. How do you convince people that online volunteering is worthwhile?
Margaret, it's Tina. I wouldn't mind jumping in on this one because I have heard that. And what we've done is, for those who are nervous about doing something online, there's also virtual volunteering. So something like the Strongest Families Institute, who have 94 online coaches that are providing mental health support to people across the province. And they just needed a boost. And the Strongest Families Institute had asked TD volunteers to send a letter of encouragement and thanks for the work that their coaches were doing on the line. It's a form of virtual, but it's not where you need to be seen on a screen. And we had just over 140 cards sent to the team members. And it became a family affair for many of the TD employees in the area. So I think that there's ways that you can be volunteering. It could be virtual or it could be distant, but there's still, you can make an impact.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. And I think it probably takes a little bit of a shift in some people. If your concept of volunteering might be really hands-on, it takes a little bit of a shift to understand what it might look like in this new reality. That's great. I'm keeping an eye on time here at the Chamber. We have commitment to starting and ending on time, and we've just got a few minutes before we wrap up. I did want to thank Skylar for the really great comment too about being a fantastic way to understand what's happening around you. And really getting to know your community. That's great. Thank you. So I just want to turn to our 4 presenters and just ask if you have any kind of final words, any tips for the folks watching, or next steps, just to wrap up. Why don't we start with Tina?
I truly believe that volunteering is the way that you're going to make your workforce more engaged in both the community and your company. It's a way of providing them with opportunities and challenges that you're not going to find in a workforce. So please, if you're thinking about doing some volunteering or creating a program within your own company, reach out and find somebody that can help guide you on that. And how about I send it back over to Nathan, Margaret?
Great.
Thanks, Margaret. So I'm going to use my last time just to do a quick plug for the Connector program for people that are interested in volunteering and looking for a virtual opportunity. So the Connector program exists throughout Nova Scotia from Sydney to Yarmouth. And what's involved is, meeting with either a recent grad or a newcomer to the province, having an informational meeting. And it's all done through Zoom these days or an online platform, and really just sharing your network. And, it is a very quick way that you can make an impact on someone's life. And you do see the results of it. We see it on a monthly basis where people do end up finding employment through the connections they make or the referrals that they get. So if anyone is looking for, an opportunity to do virtual volunteering, please reach out to me at the Halifax Partnership Connector Program, and I can put you in touch either with one of my team or with people throughout the province.
Thank you very much. And we'll go over to Kurt. Final words.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks everybody for taking time today to, find out more. And more importantly, if you want to get involved, I'm going to put my contact info in the chat group. Feel free to send me an email, give me a call, text me. But I do a lot of volunteering here locally in Halifax, as well as with my own organization. So if people are looking to get involved, I can help you and connect you somewhere.
Super. And Chris, final word.
Perfect. Great to have everybody on the call. Thank you so much for your participation. I'm seeing all of the chat. I've changed my screen so I can see all the chats. Just phenomenal. My personal self-esteem is near the top. That's great. Barb, you've been a big part of that. Love you, Barb. LC, you had your video on the whole time. I noticed and I respect that. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody else for showing up. It's great to have you. And listen, we'll follow this up with some of those action steps. If you're not the right person to fill out a survey, you may know the right person. And there's a Listen Up show that's sponsored by the Atlantic Corporate Volunteering Council. We've done 2 years of shows. We've got great recordings. The next one coming up with Derek Feldman will be phenomenal. He actually might be a better presenter than most, and I'm pretty finicky about that. And then one other thing that we'll let you know about, this is happening with a guy, Jacob McIsaac. He's also a Haligonian. He runs security at Dalhousie University, but does restorative practice work and works with the police department on wrongful death issues, all that fun stuff. It's called the Black and White series, dealing with issues of race in a world of gray. So please tune into that. We'll have those podcasts up and going in 3 months as well. Lots of great stuff happening in the Maritimes. Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah,
thanks, everybody.
Sure. And there's so much reading that we can do. So we'll look forward to sharing all that information with everyone attending today. So really want to thank Chris, Kurt, Tina, and Nathan for your time and for joining our discussion today. The Halifax Chamber is hosting more webinars every week with experts who are leading the business community and are pioneering in this new normal. There are 2 more new webinars tomorrow, so make sure to check them out. It's at halifaxchamber.com/events for a full lineup. And the webinar today was recorded and will be available to all attendees. So thanks again for joining us and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.